Wheelchair basketball players demonstrate varying trunk and arm movement when pushing the chair, dribbling, passing, shooting, and rebounding due to their differences in muscle function. Observed trunk movement and stability during actual basketball activity, instead of a medical diagnosis or muscle function on an examining table, form the basis for a player's assignment to a particular classification. Classifiers watch the player's functions during practice or competition and assign the player a classification based on their observations. Classification systems ensure that players with limited or absent lower limb or trunk movement will have a chance to play, and that the strategies and skills of a team, not the amount of physical movement of its players, would determine success in competition. The IWBF Functional Player Classification System was first introduced in 1984, with only 4 classes. Since then, modifications have been made. When a player does not fit clearly into the descriptions of either one class or the next, they are assigned a half point, creating classifications of 1.5, 2.5, and 3.5. Also, Class 4.5 was added to make a distinctive class for players with minimal disabilities. Players are assigned a point value based on their classification. These points are added during play to ensure that a team does not exceed a predetermined maximum number of points on the floor at any one time. In IWBF international competitions, the maximum number of allowable points is 14. This video is designed to introduce new classifiers as well as players and coaches to the IWBF player classification system and to help in identifying key functional abilities for players in classes 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and 4.5. There are 4 simple tests that can be done right away to speed up the classification of players. These tests will separate Class 1 and 2 players from the rest quickly and clearly. Class 1 and 2 players cannot pick up the ball with 2 hands from the floor and return to an upright sitting position. Players in the Class 1 and 2 categories also cannot pick up the ball with both hands when the ball is at the side of their chair. They cannot hold the ball with 2 hands when both arms are fully extended, and they show very little mobility when turning from side to side with their arms crossed over their chest. Players in the 2.5 category to the 4.5 class perform well in these 4 tests, as you can see while a Class 4 player goes through them. Here Marnie Abbott of Canada represents the classic example of a Class 1 player. It is most important for classifiers to watch the player start and stop their wheelchair. In an upright position, when she starts out slowly, Marnie leans into the back of the chair and her head moves slightly forward and backward with each push. When Marnie pushes more quickly, she rests her upper body on her raised knees for support. Notice that when she stops, she must push her upper body back up with her hands. Whenever she stops, her shoulders become thrown back and then her upper body wobbles slightly forward. Class 1 players usually dribble at the side of the wheelchair, and this is characterized by instability of the upper body and slow acceleration. Some players may dribble in front of the footrests, resting the upper body on elevated knees for stability. Dribbling is very difficult to execute for a Class 1 player, especially when moving the ball across the chair to change hands, because of the lack of stability in their upper body. When Marnie dribbles, she uses her non-dribbling hand for support and balance. When asked to dribble by pushing with only one hand and to alternate the hand bouncing the ball as she goes, you can see that Marnie has a particularly difficult time because at the moment she changes hands and can't use either for support, she has problems balancing. Even while stationary, when Marnie tries to change ball hands, as she bounces the ball, you can again see she must hang on for balance as she makes the switch. The two-handed chest pass can only be made with the upper body pressing into the back of the chair, as Marnie does here, or by resting on elevated knees. Notice that after Marnie releases the ball, she falls forward and catches herself to remain upright. When making a one-handed pass, the Class 1 player remains in contact with the back of the chair for support, holds the chair with the non-throwing hand for balance as the pass is made. This is evident as Marnie makes passes with either hand. The Class 1 player almost always tries to catch with one hand, because they need the other hand to hang on to the chair for balance. This player is also unable to rotate to receive an over-the-shoulder pass without using one hand on the wheelchair or their leg to turn their upper body. When making a two-handed shot, you can see that Marnie keeps her upper body in contact with the back support of her chair. In fact, as Marnie shoots, her back is bent right over the support of the chair. When the Class 1 player shoots with one hand, there is significant loss of stability in the upper body as the shooting arm extends over the head during follow-through, requiring arm support after the shot. As with catching passes, the Class 1 player usually reaches with one hand for a rebound while holding the chair to stabilize the upper body with the opposite hand, as we see Marnie do here. When Marnie uses two hands over her head to get a rebound, her back is in contact with the back support, and you can see that this is a very unstable position for her. Class 1 players are in a very unstable position whenever they have both hands off the wheels, whether they are catching a pass, shooting, or rebounding. As a result, a Class 1 player can easily be knocked off balance by minimal chair contact. The Class 2 player has greater trunk stability when starting, pushing, and stopping than does a Class 1 player. You'll notice that the player's back is not always against the support of the chair, as Shira Golden of Canada demonstrates here. Shira leans forward when she starts out. Her back is off the support of the chair, she has good acceleration, and stops more solidly than a Class 1 player. Her back remains far more upright, not pressed way back into the support of the chair. There is some loss of stability, noted primarily at the waist. With each pushing motion, there is forward movement of the upper body without the movement of the lower trunk. A Class 2 player usually dribbles the ball beside the front casters, especially when dribbling involves an initial loss of stability. Some Class 2 players may dribble directly ahead of the front casters, as Shira does, especially when the upper body is supported by a high placement of the knees. As you can see, Shira's upper body remains more upright compared to a Class 1 player, and her back is not always against the chair's back support. The Class 2 player has much better balance when changing hands across the chair and remains quite upright. Watch as Shira's trunk moves reasonably well as she dribbles from side to side. Remember that Marnie, the Class 1 player, had to keep checking her balance with her free hand when dribbling in this manner. The Class 2 player has fair stability when throwing and catching in an upright position. Notice that Shira's back is hardly pressed into the back of the chair while executing either skill. When making a two-handed pass, Shira does not need to use her hands to check her balance. Although she does need to stabilize herself with her free hand as she makes a one-handed pass, she does not have nearly the difficulty of the Class 1 player. Shira does have some balance problems when she catches a ball with two hands if it's thrown off to the side. The Class 2 player is able to rotate their trunk to make an over-the-shoulder catch with two hands, using some support from the back of the wheelchair. A Class 2 player has the muscle power to resist the backward movement of the trunk when they lift the ball upwards. You can see that Shira does not lean back into the chair when she shoots, as Marnie had to do. However, there is a mild to moderate loss of stability in the lower trunk during arm extension and follow-through. This results in movement of the lower trunk away from the back of the wheelchair. The Class 2 player can rotate the trunk toward the basket when shooting with both hands. Two-handed over-the-head rebounds can be executed by the Class 2 player, but these are often accompanied by moderate loss of stability. The Class 2 player usually rebounds with one hand with minimal to moderate loss of stability. Similar to Class 1 players, minimal chair contact when both hands are off the wheels will cause Class 2 players to lose their balance when shooting and passing, forcing them to use their hands to recover. Also, like Class 1 players, Class 2 players usually rebound with one hand so that they can stabilize themselves with the other, and even minimum chair contact will significantly affect their ability to control the ball and to continue the play. Rosalena Barrera of Brazil is a good example of a Class 3 player. Typical of the Class 3 player, Rosalena is able to position herself in the best pushing position and can push the wheelchair forcefully with no loss of stability. Notice that she follows through with her arms more than a Class 1 or 2 player. She is very quick and powerful and maintains good balance when stopping. This pushing movement is not much different between players of the 3.0, 3.5, 4.0, and 4.5 categories. So pushing and stopping are really only useful in differentiating between players in the 1.0 to 3.0 categories. Note that most Class 3 players' knees are together when they push, but there can be exceptions. Rosalena's knees are apart, but this does not affect the classic trunk position of the Class 3 player. As a Class 3 player, Rosalena can dribble the ball in front of the casters with one hand, while accelerating quickly by pushing forcefully with the other hand. She can switch hands across the front of the chair without having to check her balance, and her trunk flexes powerfully forward in the direction of the dribble. The Class 3 player can make two- and one-handed passes without using arm or back support to maintain their balance. Rosalena is able to make strong passes because her trunk flexes forward with each pass. This movement is possible because the Class 3 player has some pelvic control. However, because a Class 3 player does not have complete balance to the sides, Rosalena typically balances herself with her non-throwing hand when making overhand passes. Class 3 players can get near maximal rotation to catch over-the-shoulder passes with both hands without support of the back of the wheelchair. There is some difference between Class 2 and Class 3 players in shooting. The Class 3 player's trunk moves toward the basket with the shooting movement and follows through with excellent stability. The Class 3 player can rebound well with two hands overhead. However, this player has limited stability when reaching to the side and often holds the side of the wheelchair with the off hand for balance. Unlike Class 1 and 2 players, Class 3 players are not very affected by minimum chair contact when they have both hands away from the wheels. Here is Gilberto Hernandez of Mexico, a Class 4 player. Pushing is not a good indicator of the difference between a Class 3 player and a Class 4 player. The Class 4 player can push the wheelchair with rapid acceleration and maximum forward movement of the trunk. Gilberto is very stable as he makes his turns. The Class 4 player's ability to dribble is not much different than a 3.0, 3.5, or even a 4.5 player. Gilberto can dribble well ahead of the front casters while pushing with the other hand, and can move rapidly and change direction without loss of trunk stability. Gilberto, much like the Class 3 player, has no problem in changing hands across the front of the chair while dribbling, because he has strong balance from side to side. So although this alone does not differentiate Gilberto from a Class 3 player, it does distinguish him from Class 1.0 to Class 2.5 players. Gilberto, as a Class 4 player, can flex, extend, and rotate his trunk fully while making two-handed and one-handed passes. Typically, a Class 4 player has very good balance when making a two-handed pass or catch to the sides. However, these players are usually weaker on one side. Notice that Gilberto has some difficulty catching on his weaker left side, but is very stable when catching a ball thrown off to his right. A Class 4 player can lean to the side or rotate while leaning to at least one side, while keeping both hands up as he or she holds the ball. After shooting, the Class 4 player's trunk moves strongly in the direction of the follow-through. Gilberto is a typical Class 4 player in that he is able to lean forward and at least to one side to grab an over-the-head rebound with both hands. Watch as he solidly makes rebounds to his stronger right side, but has some difficulty on his weaker left side. Class 4 players are hardly affected by minimum chair contact when they have both hands off their wheels. Canada's René Delcalle is a 4.5 player. The difference between a Class 4.5 player and a 3.0, 3.5, or a 4.0 player in pushing style is that the 4.5 player is able to remain very high in the chair while still maintaining excellent balance in the classic pushing position. As a classifier, you will not notice much difference between the dribbling ability of a 3.0, 3.5, 4.0, or a 4.5 player. Like the others, the 4.5 player moves the ball from side to side in front of the chair with great stability. Notice that Renee moves in a straighter line than the other players you've seen as she dribbles and changes hands. This is because she has total trunk and pelvic control. Watch as Renee makes chest passes. Her back is not against the back of the chair at all. She follows the ball with her trunk and has total balance in the chair. A Class 4.5 player can lean and make two-handed passes equally well on either side with great stability. Even as Renee makes a baseball pass, we can see she has complete balance throughout the motion. Notice that the 4.5 player has no difficulty in catching balls thrown to either side, whether they be high or low throws. This player also has no problem when catching balls thrown very low in front of them. Class 4.5 players can move the trunk forcefully in all directions when shooting. These players can also lean to both sides and lean with rotation to both sides while keeping both hands on the ball. Renee, as a 4.5 player, possesses sufficient function in her legs to move them apart, giving her excellent stability. This allows her to move with complete balance forward, or to either side, with her arms above her head when rebounding. Chair contact, unless it's very hard, will have little effect on a Class 4.5 player. This player can adjust immediately and continue their pass, shot, or rebound. Whether you are a new classifier, player, or coach, we hope that this video has been a helpful introduction to the International Wheelchair Basketball Federation's player classification system, and that it has taught you how to identify functional abilities for athletes in Class 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4.5. The IWBF player classification system is a living system based on the basic principles of observation of the wheelchair basketball skills that the players perform. In order to be a confident classifier, it is of the utmost importance to know all the wheelchair basketball skills and how they are performed by the different classes of players. A classifier must not just know the skills and observe them, but must also regularly practice the art of classification. For more information about player classification, contact
house.